we take time to remember what exactly it is that Yom HaShoah asks us to remember. We're asked to remember the 6 million Jews who were killed during what we now call the Holocaust. 6 million Jews who never went home again, and millions of others traumatized, displaced, harmed in unfathomable ways, physically, psychologically, emotionally. It's not an easy day, not an easy thing to remember, but it's as important to do so now as it was in the years directly after World War II ended and the death camps were liberated. It's important because to this day, anti-Semitism is real and present and threatens our collective safety. So this morning, we too remember. To open our service, we offer you this poem written by Amos Neufeld for his father, Ernest, as I light 6 candles to symbolize the 6 million lost lives.
The burning star. I think of all the conversations we never had, a sunless void waiting to be filled, a hurt that did not heal, just your silence, and a boy trying to understand that distance. A hard place I could not enter, a dark landscape of losses, never lit by you. The stark, difficult years we crossed alone, longing to feel your arm on my shoulder, going back home together to where everything once was, a paradise of sunlight on olive trees, Jerusalem at night in starlight, not left behind, your dreams not ended. There was more to find. I would wait forever to feel your arm around me, walking back into the burning sun.
Grief is real, a weight upon the shoulders, unwelcome, unlike the weight of a beloved's arm. Loss can live in us for generations. Trauma is passed down in our blood, and the silence and hurt travel through the ages. And yet still there is sunlight on olive trees, the warmth of our burning star, dreams that have not ended, more world to travel, more landscape to traverse, more to find, more to become. Today, we dwell in sorrow and questions in our time together, but also in our remembering, we encounter again the truth of human resilience, of love that transcends pain, of beauty both natural and human-made. These two are real. These welcome gifts of human strength are also passed down from generation to generation in ritual and story and action, and yes, even in silence. As steady and as strong as the stars that light the night and the mountains that rise above us. This morning, though we mourn, for these gifts we also give thanks.
Our first reading today is from Dante's Inferno. It's an epic poem that ranges from hell to purgatory and then into paradise, as the poet explores the nature of existence and the organization of the cosmos. And so today we're reading the section, which is a speech given by Ulysses, who is more commonly known as Odysseus, when Dante and his guide Virgil happen upon him in one of the deeper levels of hell. Ulysses tells a bit of his story from inside of a pillar of fire. And he says, "When I departed from Circe, who held me back more than a year near Gaeta, before Aeneas gave it that name, neither the sweetness of a son nor the compassion for my old father nor the love owed to Penelope, which should have made her glad, could conquer within me the ardor that I had to gain experience of the world and of human vices and worth. But I put out on the deep, open sea alone, with one ship, and with that little company by which I had not been deserted. The one shore and the other I saw as far as Spain, as far as Morocco and the islands of the Sardinians, and the others whose shores are bathed by that sea. I and my companions were old and slow when we came to that narrow strait which Hercules marked with his warnings, so that one should not go further. On the right hand, I saw Seville, and on the other, I had already left Ceuta. Oh, brothers, I said, who through 100,000 perils have reached the West to this so brief vigil of our senses that remains, do not deny the experience following the sun of the world without people. Consider your sowing. You were not made to live like brutes, but to follow virtue and knowledge. My companions I had made so sharp for the voyage with this little oration that after it I could hardly have held them back. And turning our stern toward the morning of our oars, we made wings for the mad flight, always gaining on the left side. Already all the stars of the other pole I saw at night, and our own pole so low that it did not rise above the floor of the sea. 5 times renewed and as many diminished had been the light beneath the moon since we had entered the deep pass, when there appeared to us a mountain, dark in the distance, and it seemed to me higher than any I had seen. We rejoiced, but it quickly turned to weeping, for from the new land a whirlwind was born and struck the forequarter of the ship. 3 times it made the ship to turn about with all the waters. At the fourth, to rise its stern aloft, and prow to go down, as it pleased another, until the sea had closed over us.
Take a deep breath, slow and even. Steady yourselves in the wake of Ulysses' words. Breathe deeply and let go the image of the mariner's eternal form speaking from inside a pillar of fire. Breathe slowly and deeply, evenly, gently, and bring your body to stillness like the motionless, calm sea. In the quiet, with each breath coming in and out of your body is a gentle wave. Let yourself hold the truth of our human journeys. Travelers we are, all of us. Travelers with our bands of companions. Travelers, lost sometimes, found sometimes. Seeking, searching, yearning. Encountering pain and anger, confusion and questions, and also beauty, knowledge and virtue, love and partnership. We journeyers hold it all. This morning, with our companions, we hold together those of us enduring grief, fresh sorrows or long-standing pain or generational trauma. We are gentle with each other, and offer to each other love and care. We hold together those of us celebrating joyous news. Vaccinations that help heal us and protect us. Renewed opportunities to be with one another. New births and ongoing lives and the beginnings of fresh futures. We rejoice with one another, delighting in each other's joy. We hold our own complexity and that of our companions as we sit together in silence and breathe in deeply. Sometimes words fail us. Sometimes words fail those we love. Sometimes silence is all that we have. Sometimes silence is all that we are given. Yet in the silence, there is still presence. In the silence, there is still love.
Calamity and injustice can so often crash upon us unexpectedly, but so too can those infinite seconds of quiet joy, a trembling spring bud, or the bright blue of a robin's egg. Breathe. Each breath can be counted. Each breath is precious. Each breath valuable beyond any measure. We breathe so that we can hold the spaces between the words, the quiet of home after a long adventure. We breathe to give life, to meaning, and to each other. May the flames of our sorrows give way to the joy of a warm home. May all of our breaths remind us of the shared hearth of humanity, in which pain and happiness exist side by side. And may we find comfort in our sorrows, meaning in our breathing. Times for songs and times for silence. May it be so, and amen.
Our second reading this morning is by Primo Levi, an Italian Jewish chemist, writer, and Holocaust survivor. One of Levi's most famous works is his book, Survival in Auschwitz. In it is a chapter titled The Canto of Ulysses. The chapter recounts Levi's walk with another prisoner, Jean, who he calls Piccolo, to pick up soup for the commando. As they make their way to the kitchens to pick up the vat of soup that they will walk back with a pole stretched between them, Levi attempts to explain Dante's Divine Comedy to Jean. And in this explaining and translating from medieval Italian into French, Levi finds himself attempting to remember the speech we just heard, the one that Ulysses gives in Inferno, the first book of Dante's masterpiece. Levi writes, "The canto of Ulysses, who knows how or why it comes into my mind, but we have no time to change. This hour is already less than an hour. If Jean is intelligent, he will understand. He will understand. Today, I feel capable of so much." Jean pays great attention, and I begin slowly and accurately. Then of that age-old fire, the loftier horn began to mutter and move as a wavering flame wrestles against the wind and is overworn. And like a speaking tongue vibrant to frame language, the top of it flickering to and fro, threw out a voice and answered, "When I came." And after when I came, nothing, a hole in my memory. Before Aeneas ever named it so, another hole. A fragment floats into my mind, not relevant, nor piety to my old father, nor the wedded love that should have comforted Penelope. Is it correct? So on the open sea I set forth. Of this I am certain. I am sure. I can explain it to Piccolo. I can point out why I set forth is not je me mis. It is much stronger and more audacious. It's a chain which has been broken. It is throwing oneself on the other side of a barrier. We know the impulse well. The open sea. Piccolo has traveled by sea and knows what it means. It's when the horizon closes in on itself, free, straight ahead and simple, and there is nothing but the smell of the sea, sweet things ferociously far away. Open sea, open sea. I know it rhymes with left me and that small band of comrades that never left me. But I cannot remember if it comes before or after. And the journey as well, the foolhardy journey beyond the pillars of Hercules. How sad I have to tell it in prose, a sacrilege. I have only rescued 2 lines, but they're worth stopping for. That none should prove so hardy to venture the uncharted distances. To venture. I had to come to the logger to realize that this is the same expression as before. I set forth. But I say nothing to Jean. I'm not sure that it's an important observation. How many things there are to say. And the sun is already high. Midday is near. I am in a hurry, a terrible hurry. Here, listen, Piccolo, open your ears and your mind. You have to understand for my sake. Think of your breed. For brutish ignorance, your metal was not made. You were made men to follow after knowledge and excellence. As if I was also hearing it for the first time, like the blast of a trumpet, like the voice of God. For a moment, I forget who I am and where I am. Piccolo begs me to repeat it. How good Piccolo is. He's aware that he is doing me good. Or perhaps it's something more. Perhaps despite the wan translation and the pedestrian rushed commentary, he has received the message. He has felt that it has to do with him, that it has to do with all men who toil, and with us in particular, and that it has to do with us too, who dare to reason of these things with the poles for the soup on our shoulders. One must go on. I try to reconstruct it through the rhymes. I close my eyes. I bite my fingers, but it is of no use. The rest is silence. Other verses dance in my head. It's late. It is late. We have reached the kitchen. I must finish. And 3 times round she went in roaring smother with all the waters. At the 4th, the poop rose and the brow went down and pleased as another. I keep Piccolo back. It is vitally necessary and urgent that he listen, that he understand this as pleased another before it is too late. Tomorrow, he or I might be dead, or we might never see each other again. I must tell him, I must explain to him about the Middle Ages, about the so human and so necessary and yet unexpected anachronism, but still more, something gigantic that I myself have only just seen in a flash of intuition. Perhaps the reason for our fate, for our being here today. And over our heads, the hollow seas closed up. During my doctorate in my late 20s, I had occasion to attend a conference in Jerusalem. A friend met me about a week in advance of the academic gathering, and we spent those days visiting sites holy to the three major monotheistic religions of the world. Whatever I expected to experience, I didn't. I had gone in part to present my research, but also to deepen my understanding of what I was studying, the Stations of the Cross and their relationship to the geography of Jerusalem. I'd been studying medieval Christianity for years at this point, and I think I anticipated feeling an intense reaction to that side of history, the side that had filled my reading and writing, and that was helping me understand, in some ways, my father's family, the family that we never really saw. But the reality was very different. I was far more affected by the sites that spoke to my Jewish ancestry, Masada, the Wailing Wall, and so much more. And one of the memories that stands out in my mind was our visit to Yad Vashem, the World Holocaust Remembrance Center. Early in our walk through, my friend and I got separated, and I lost all sense of time. My heart was breaking as I moved through the exhibits and memorials. The walk borders on silent as visitors are asked to enter into quiet reverence for the memories they are encountering. By the time I was done walking through and found my friend again outside, she was in something of a panic because I'd been gone so long and she just didn't understand where I could possibly have been. I had absolutely no concept of how long I had been walking, lost in memories not my own, but in a history that I share in. When I was young, my sensitive and feeling heart broke easily and I wept freely. Books, movies, music, Hallmark commercials talk of the Holocaust. The poignant, the melancholic, the nostalgic, things that evoked the pain of being human tugged at me and tears would come. Somewhere along the way, I stopped crying so freely. Perhaps age and time hardened me a little on the outside, but my feelings were never any less deep. And this, the memory of what humans are capable of doing to one another, the memory of loss, the memory of pain that cannot be forgotten, of forced silence, it still breaks my heart. 6 million Jews, millions of others, and then in truth, all throughout history, so many genocides. So many that honestly, there are ones I didn't even know about. Only recently did I learn about the 20th century Armenian genocide. So much heartbreak, so much evil, and it inevitably leads to the question, why? Why do bad things happen? Why is there so much pain? For the first time, I had a conversation with my entire family at the dinner table about the topic of my sermon. I told them I was talking about this question, why do bad things happen? And my oldest first reflected that just happens, often not because anyone does anything, just happens. One of the twins chimed in that sometimes bad things happen because good people do bad things. And then Grandpa spoke up. I think the question is wrong, he said. You need to ask a different question. Why, he reframed it, why wouldn't bad things happen? What kind of hubris assumes that life should only be good? I've been thinking a lot about my dad's answer. So often we imagine that question, why do bad things happen, as coming from the mouths of babes, and yet in truth, not one of my children has ever asked it. They've asked what to do when bad things happen or how it will feel, but they haven't assumed that life should be all sunshine and roses. And I've had the recurring thought as I have watched them grow that perhaps they are closer to some intuitive understanding of the shifts and changes of life, since they are constantly shifting and changing as they grow. They haven't hardened into one way of being, and their sense of loss as they move from one stage to another keeps them constantly reminded that their journey is one of change. Perhaps this is why I wept more freely as a young person. We think so often of loss as a grown-up's experience, but change is ever present for children. The other twin often talks about what he will be reborn as. A dog was the latest. No one ever taught my child about reincarnation. He just imagines that this is how the world will work. Perhaps he's heard the phrases in a past life or in my next life, but he has built a sort of theology around whatever first inspired this thought. And I have been reflecting on how, for now at least, death seems less scary to him. It's a mere part of the cycles that he will undergo. We often describe death as bad because it produces in us feelings of hurt and sorrow. Death is painful. For those left behind, certainly grief and sorrow are real, and it makes perfect sense that we humans would rail against the feelings we are left with when we lose someone. And yet, and I say this to my children, death is also just part of life, a necessary component in creating the balance that allows being to perpetuate. The nature of being is balance: sun and moon, water and land, earth and sky, life and death, pleasure and pain. Why wouldn't bad things happen? Why would we assume that the world was designed to be painless when everything about the natural world teaches us balance? In one way, my father is right. Bad things simply happen, and to question them seems somewhat foolish. They're a part of the natural course of things. Accidents, mistakes, random chance. We have no way to explain these things other than that they are part of what it means to be alive. And so the question is flawed.
We might also say that so-called natural bad things happen because we are just physically embodied, feeling beings. The very fact that we have life and bodies and that these bodies are effective in the world, we can move things or change things, encounter things, and all of these things are outside of ourselves. They all resist us, means that we can also be harmed or affected by these external events. It is the groundwork for any meaning making whatsoever. If things did not resist us and potentially harm us as a result, everything would be changing by our very whim. It would simply be an extension of our will. It would just melt away in an instant. For instance, the sense of meaningful accomplishment that we feel when we climb a mountain would disappear if the mountain did not sit resolute in its tall and unyielding being. But on the same token, this resistance, it renders us vulnerable to earthquakes or tornadoes.
And yet there is something different, something apart from the random chance badness of life or the natural bad that occurs, something different from the disease that nothing and no one caused but ravages our body anyway, different from the well-meaning mistakes of good or careless folks that cause pain, different from the inevitable pain of decisions we know are right but hurt anyway. There's something more out there. There's a different kind of bad, one that my children only have nightmares about but have yet to experience firsthand, as evidenced by the fact that not one of them said bad things happen because there are bad people in the world. They may not have internalized it yet, but there is a special kind of badness out there. And perhaps here the question needs further refining. Sometimes bad things happen because people make harmful and hurtful choices willfully. The question then becomes, why do people do this? Why do people engage in evil doing? Last week we spoke about Easter, the holiday that for many represents the moment of redemption from our original sin in the garden, sin that supposedly cursed us to experience pain and hardship here on this earth. We Unitarian Universalists ditched the theological notion of original sin and of God's testing and punishment long ago. There's a classic line about this. The Unitarians believed humans were too good to be damned, and the Universalists believed that God was too good to damn humanity. Whichever way you lean, we use tend to believe that humans have the free will to determine who they will become and what kind of life they will lead. Of course, science and experience also teach us that we are all impacted by family, history, society, genetics, and more. Our free will doesn't exist in a vacuum, but we don't believe human babies are born stained, predisposed to evil or goodness. We believe they're born with potential and possibility that can also be used for evil through human choice. Over and over in history, we humans have proved ourselves capable of harm against one another.
This human harm we do against one another is, I believe, also caught up in this question of our finitude. But our human meaning making comes from resistance, and human ills come from something else. In part, human ills come from a world which has limited resources and which requires toil to live. It is a condition often referred to as scarcity, a notion of scarcity of time, scarcity of resources, scarcity of food or water or of shelter. And this scarcity compelled humans to covet the limited food, water, materials, time, labor. This covetousness also took the form of war and enslavement as models of extracting the means to reproduce life more efficiently and subsequently more oppressively. Human life and history is continuous, and the effects of oppression and violence do not disappear between one generation and another. Instead, they grow and change and morph, but they're always leaving a mark on all, albeit differently. I believe that as we get more sophisticated in our means to reproduce human life and to respond to trauma, we also meet increasingly complex traumas. Injustice arises from being meaning-making creatures who were also born into a finite world where we ply our free will. This will is only half formed, crippled by the oppression-oppressive, scarcity-abundance nexus, which complexity keeps returning into human development.
Perhaps it is the vestiges of tribalism or scarcity thinking, this competition for survival. Others might say it is simply part of human nature. And perhaps it is something we have imposed on one another. Millennia of religious and culturally based shame, self-doubt, separation, millennia of lies that prop up systems of oppression and privilege, millennia of distance placed between us and our own hearts, between us and each other. Unsatisfyingly, then, we have only a partial answer to the question, why do bad things happen? Our shared theology teaches us that natural and chance bad things are a part of living, and that what we do with them, how we react, matters more than whence they come. But the bad things that are of human creation, unsatisfyingly, we have no one answer to why humans make evil in this world. A lack of answer doesn't make it the wrong question, but it does generate a new one. Human evil is real, alive, and confronts us near daily. Will it ever not? I was talking about today's service with Kristen, and she shared a funny but also deeply theological moment from her own life.
About 21 years ago, when Jeff and I lived in an apartment in Brooklyn, I was home by myself on a random weekday afternoon. The buzzer rang and I answered it, and an overly friendly voice said, "Hello, this is Carlene from Watchtower Publications. Do you believe there will ever be a time when human suffering will end? I thought about it for a minute and I pushed the button and I said, nope. And that was it. I didn't engage. There was no need for discussion. I believed then, and I still believe now, that, and this is not just because I didn't want to engage with a Jehovah's Witness, but I really do believe that given who we are, there will never be an end to human suffering.
Kristen gave a simple answer through her buzzer, no. Kristen did not and does not believe that a time will come when human evil no longer exists, that for as long as there are people, competing interests, selfish desires, separation between us, there will be evil. And I laughed when Kristen shared her story with me, and it still makes me chuckle. That one word, just nope, right into the buzzer. On some level, I feel the same. And yet if I force myself to sit with the question and the possible answers, in spite of my sensitive and weepy heart, in spite of what I know about the evils of humanity, still and always, I refuse to believe in the inevitability of human evil. Part of why I refuse to believe in its inevitability is because it feels like a betrayal of those who have suffered at the hands of their fellow humans, and a betrayal of those who survived horrors beyond my imagining. When he accepted the Nobel Peace Prize in 1986, Elie Wiesel said, "I remember it happened yesterday or eternities ago. A young Jewish boy discovered the kingdom of night. I remember his bewilderment. I remember his anguish. It all happened so fast. The ghetto, the deportation, the sealed cattle car, the fiery altar upon which the history of our people and the future of mankind were meant to be sacrificed. I remember he asked his father, can this be true? This is the 20th century, not the Middle Ages. Who would allow such crimes to be committed? How could the world remain silent? And now the boy is turning to me. Tell me, he asks, what have you done with my future? What have you done with your life? And I tell him that I have tried to keep memory alive, that I have tried to fight those who would forget, because if we forget, we are guilty. We are accomplices. This is what I say to the young Jewish boy wondering what I have done with his years. It is in his name that I speak to you and that I express to you my deepest gratitude. No one is as capable of gratitude as one who has emerged from the kingdom of night. We know that every moment is a moment of grace, every hour an offering. Not to share them would mean to betray them. Our lives no longer belong to us alone. They belong to all those who need us desperately. Yes, I have faith. If Wiesel can have faith, can't I? His faith is in the Jewish people, he says, and in God. At my family dinner table, God didn't come up in our discussion of this question, but for many, God does. Why, if God exists, would God allow such horrors to occur?
On days when I'm feeling more theological, I think of Job, the righteous man in the Hebrew Bible who suffers greatly due to a divine bet, whose family dies and who loses everything, even though he was God's most faithful servant. And the piece ends only with Job confronting God with the injustices that he suffered. God gives him a response that is dissatisfying to many. Essentially, God says that he made everything and is super awesome, so who is Job to complain? But Wiesel tells us about Job, and he says that Job personified humanity's eternal quest for justice and truth. Thanks to him, we know that it is given to humans to transform divine injustice into human justice and compassion. And perhaps this is the ultimate reason why bad things happen. Because it's humanity's divine mission to turn the injustice of creation into justice.
For some, God died in the camps, or at least a God that acts and protects died in the camps. And what remained was humanity. Humanity that can choose to move toward evil or choose to move toward good, that can perpetuate injustice or create justice. Wiesel had faith in part because he understood what it was to survive, in spite of heartbreak, the likes of which many of us will never know. He understood what it was to hope in the face of desperation and to write and remember and create. He understood what it was to cultivate faith in spite of it all. The theology I hold on to is one that says the human desire to survive, the resilience, the grit, the determination we possess to live even through pain, that is in and of itself something worth living for, fighting for, having faith in. Think of every instance of human evil, and right alongside it, you will find instances of human goodness and human power, and of beauty. Primo Levi tried to teach a young Frenchman, his traveling companion for that day, about Dante. Tried to remember and recite a centuries-old speech put into the mouth of a millennia-old character, a speech spoken in the depths of hell. He tried to remember because those lines of carefully crafted terza rima offered meaning, offered depth, offered salvation in a death camp. Something about this particular speech, one that speaks of the wanderlust of travel, the adventure of being out in the world, one that recognizes the power and limitations of shared humanity. Something about this speech burst through Levi as he made his way that day through the hell that his fellow humans had created for him. A need for beauty, for memory, for silence as he gropes toward language half remembered. The theology I hold on to is one that says, in spite of everything, beauty exists and human ingenuity and memory make it manifest. Meaning making is possible, and that meaning making should not be about a divine that condemns or tests or about martyrdom, but about the value of human companionship, friendship, love, care, compassion, silence and speech and moments of joyous memory and recitation shining through in even the most unlikely places. I hear Ulysses speaking out of the fire like a burning sun. We are made to seek after knowledge and excellence. We're made to travel this wide world, this life's journey, knowing all the while that our time upon the open sea is full of risks, natural and human-made, and that our journey is best undertaken acknowledging that hard truth honestly, best undertaken in company with our chosen companions, and best undertaken with hearts as open as we can possibly bear, hearts ready to weep and to rejoice in equal measure as we make our way. So may it be.